welcome to the Not So Small Business Webcast. We're your hosts. I'm Brian Moran.
I'm Kelly Brozyna.
Hello, Kelly.
How are you, Brian?
I'm great. Good to see you for another month of our webcasts. I love these.
Very excited.
Yes, last month we did financial, and today I'm excited to talk about supply chain. Our guest
Seems to be the topic of choice these days.
Yes, no doubt. Well, and we have a great guest today. Our guest today is Kathleen Sullivan Garman, the founder and CEO of Sully Garman and Associates, and widely recognized as a top expert in supply chain and logistics. So with that, I want to welcome to our Not So Small Business Webcast, Kathleen Sullivan Garman.
Thanks, Brian. You're so funny. I'm excited to talk about supply chain. Nobody's ever been excited to talk about supply chain, but now this year, finally, everybody knows what it is.
Well, now everybody's going to realize how really, really important it is.
Yep.
Right.
Especially with the holidays coming upon us, which is a great, great transition of the 2021 holiday season is upon us. You know, we want to have a good Christmas and we want Santa Claus to be able to deliver all of the presents. What is the general state of supply chain right now in the United States? And a two-part, is it going to be a happy holiday season?
Well, I think that's all a matter of perspective, right? With happy holiday season, I think that flexibility is going to be really important. The businesses certainly have already had to implement a lot of flexibility, but consumers are also going to have to be flexible. My kids and I were talking about, let's do creative Christmas and give each other really creative gifts, because we were talking about the fact that some of the standard things that go on your list that that people think about might not be available this year. So we kind of have to be a little bit more flexible with how you give and receive as a consumer, and then businesses are going to have to really be a lot more flexible. There's no business as usual for 2021 holidays.
I like that, though. I like the idea of being creative and using your head a little bit. I actually heard some great examples in my local small town. The wine store is working with restaurants and saying, because in New Jersey, a lot of the restaurants are bring your own. And so the wine store said, prove that you have a reservation at a local restaurant in town, and we'll give you 10% off your wine purchase that day. I love that. That's,
and it's interesting because when we talk about supply chain and we talk about the availability, the one thing in good time and bad times that still do well is alcohol sales, right? So, no matter how you slice it and dice it, they're still going to sell product one way or the other.
Yes.
So, but it's a matter of, trucking. So I hear all these stories and maybe perhaps we can, go in a little sidebar on that is trucking an issue. So with the supply chain of getting products on the shelves or keeping them on the shelves, do we see any light at the end of the tunnel with that?
Yeah, trucking is an issue. I would say expand that though to any way that products move. So people think about, they pick something up at the store or they order something online, and they think about that product from their order to them, which is, we call that final mile. But you've got to take that a lot further, and you've got to expand that, because you have, how do those products get to the store or to the warehouse, right? So they're being manufactured somewhere, they're being sent on across the ocean on a container, or they're being sent on a truck, and everything is a domino effect. That if one piece, I mean, they call it chain for a reason, right? Like one link in the chain is broken or bent, it's going to impact everything from that point forward. So any element of movement of product is what supply chain is about. And it is so much more than what happens once the consumer places an order or goes to a store. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes. And as you mentioned, trucking, trucking's an issue, but trucking's an issue because other things up the chain created backlog that made trucking an issue.
And it's interesting because I read recently a report by, I think it was the Washington Post, that talked about the supply chain disruption and how it's disproportionately hurting small business owners, right? That they're losing out to larger customers like Walmart and Amazon. And they say, I think it was, they're often last in line for the products. Kathleen, is that something that you see or you hear about with small and mid-sized companies?
Yeah, I'm not hearing last in line for the products as much, because I deal with a lot of merchants that are making their own or sourcing their own or have invented their own product.
Okay.
But certainly for merchants that are competing with those stores, of course, Walmart is going to buy 50,000 of something and distribute it amongst all their stores, whereas
Right.
your little kitchen store in town is going to order 10 of them, right?
Right.
So it's going to be a lot harder for your kitchen store owner to get into that queue with that manufacturer to buy their 10, because they're going to get deprioritized. But more importantly than that aspect of it is, how do the products get there? Walmart has their own trucks. They have containers on the
Right.
ships. They put all of their stuff together and move it as one. Our
Mm,
guy who ordered 10 has to arrange shipping for those 10. He's got to get them to his store or to his warehouse from somewhere. And
right.
so it's a lot harder for someone that's just doing 10, because some of the freight forwarders will be, well, no, you have to do a container. Some of the larger freight forwarders, have minimum requirements. You have to book X size in order for us to even bid on it. There are ways around that. Certainly with anything in business and in life, if you're a little flexible, a little wily, there are ways around it. I have one partner that's a warehousing partner that they actually lease spare space inside the big containers. So say there's a big 40-foot container that has 5 feet of space. This warehouse that I work with leases that 5 feet, and they get a pallet out onto that container and over here and into their warehouse faster than if you were trying to book a whole container by yourself. So they have these relationships that they have decided to use and sort of leverage and try and get every inch of space they can. So if you're working with that warehouse, you can get that 5 feet of space. So there are ways to kind of go around the limitations, but a lot of it is about, making those contacts and being creative and, creative Christmas again. How wily can you get as a merchant to get your products here? Because right now you have to be as wily as possible.
So it was interesting because at one point in time in a past life, we were helping small businesses to look at exporting and importing their product and looking at trying to do a little bit of a matchmaking of, okay, if you're shipping your stuff to Africa, let's just say, that how many people are going to the same location that they can share the space. And we called it sort of matchmaking. I guess that's an interesting topic that, how do small businesses migrate to find out how to matchmake to be able to share that space? Is it just connections? Is it, how would they find out what's going to work for them in order to get their product? Because what you're saying is that people that buy or groups that buy in bulk obviously have a much better opportunity to get their product in sooner than
Right.
the ones that are buying smaller
Right.
portions. So how would a small or a micro business even, find and reach out to groups that they would be able to matchmake to share space? How would they go about doing that?
One of the issues with what you just mentioned about, okay, let's say, for example, our kitchen store that we were talking about, let's say they sell a product and there's 20 other kitchen stores that sell the same product. They're not going to want to match with the other 20 to bring the product in. They're going to want to sneak through and get their 10 so that they get the business over those other ones.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't a lot of sharing in terms of sourcing the product and bringing them in together. What is sharing is space. So container space or truck space. So that kitchen store could get their 10 units and try and get into a container or a truck that has products from all other manufacturers and all other things and all other types of products. So it's not about a whole container of that one product that they are trying to buy. It's about a full container of a variety of things and getting it in here and them getting their things. It's very interesting because, it used to be that, okay, everything had to be palletized in order to bring it over anywhere and put it on a truck or put it on a ship. Everything had to be palletized. And so you had to buy in these big bulks and ship in these big bulks. Right now, with the supply chain being squeezed, what we're finding is things are squeaking through the cracks. So you can go in and price a pallet. I just actually priced a pallet to go from Hong Kong into Los Angeles. And it was $8,000 for one single pallet.
Wow.
Keep in mind, you used to be able to get a whole container. When I say used to, I mean 3 months ago, you could get a whole container for $3,500. I could get a pallet in here for $7,000 into LA, a pallet full of products. When I broke that up into cartons, it was 42 cartons. I got a quote of $4,100 for bringing in 42 separate cartons instead of putting it on a single pallet. So you have to kind of be creative. You have to be willing to break up your pallet. Now you're going to have to track 42 cartons when you do that. However, you're going to save $3,000, and maybe they'll put 10 cartons on this plane and 10 cartons on that plane and 3 cartons on that. And then you'll get your stuff and it'll get put back together at the port, and then you'll receive it. But you have to be open to that. You have to be open, and you have to recognize that in shipping 42 pallets separately, you might lose a couple. So maybe ship 44, right? So you have to kind of, each thing you have to weigh it. Each decision in business, and especially in supply chain, you have to weigh it. You know, people are talking about, oh, bringing this in for holiday, et cetera, et cetera. It's November. Black Friday is a couple weeks away. There is no more bringing anything in right now. You know, if you have something that is on its way to a warehouse on a truck, it will get there, and it's going to take the warehouse a week and a half to log it in and get the UPC's scan and get it in their system and get it on the shelf, right? So if it's not already sitting on a shelf and ready to be pulled for Black Friday, there's a really good chance you're not going to make it. You're going to be taking, you know, pre-orders on Black Friday, which is, you know, really hard at the holiday time. So there are a lot of merchants that are being caught right now without their supply chain in place. There are, last I checked, I think it was over 50 container ships floating outside LA. There's actually websites where you can look at them and you can track I think it's called Where's My Ship or Find My Ship, something like that. I wrote a blog post on it, and there's actually
there's lots of jokes that go along with that one.
Yeah. And so there are well, when that ship was stuck in the Suez Canal, I was watching every day because I was watching the backlog, and it's really fun to watch that website. And I had it up on a second computer and was just watching it all the time. But right now, if you look at that, you will see a whole bunch of ships just hovering outside the Western US ports. And so they can't even get them in fast enough. They can't get enough trucks to pull them out. They can't get them across the country to get to the warehouses. So it's all, it's that domino effect, right? You could have this merchants thinking, I've got my Black Friday stuff. It's just sitting right there. I can see it from the beach, right? So there's a lot of frustration right now.
So the ships that are right now outside the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, obviously they're not making Black Friday, it sounds like, but will they be able to make the holiday season, the Christmas holiday season?
Yeah, there's a hope that they can, and they're working at moving it faster. And like we talked about at the beginning, people are understanding and hearing the term supply chain more now than ever. And just, I think it was last week or the week before, President Biden ordered that the Port of Long Beach and the Port of LA be open 24 hours a day. Long Beach was already open 24 hours a day before that came through. They are trying. They are really trying to get those ships in, get things unloaded. But there's only so much space, right? Which is why they have all of those ships hovering out there. There's only so much space at the port. There's only so many people to do the customs clearances. There's only so many forklifts. There's only so many trucks. And so it's all that domino effect. There is a hope that if you actually have one that's hovering outside the port, that they will get offloaded and get trucked and get in, and everybody's trying to be as optimistic as possible, trying to divert things, even divert to other ports to try to get it moved. So, you know, if you look at it right now, we're at the beginning of November, say they get it cleared, it takes a couple of weeks to get on a truck. That puts us into December, where maybe not your Black Friday orders, but your early holiday orders, you've got a shot. But you've got to ship those holiday orders to the consumers by December, 18th to 20th, or they're not going to get it in time. And then no one's happy. No one's happy at that point.
Well, you hear about the workforce shortages as well. So that comes to play. And, I've got a really good friend who works for the post office, and they're working Sundays now. And of course, they've got contracts with, I believe it's Amazon, that they're delivering packages as well. But, she's like, we're doing overtime because they're in such high demand, such workforce shortages. They can't get postal workers, to just deliver. So I think it's, it's aside from the truck, the containers, but also in the truckers, but it's also not just supply chain, it's workforce shortages as well.
Right. Well, and that impacts, again, all the way down the chain. One break in the chain or one bend in the chain So say they don't have enough workers to work the customs clearances, maybe they don't have enough truckers. Maybe they do, maybe they get it onto a truck and it's on its way down the road and the truck breaks down and they're not near any place where there's a mechanic because there's a shortage for mechanics to fix that truck and those goods are going to sit there. Or maybe three gas stations on the regular route have closed because they didn't have anybody to work at the gas stations. So there's, I mean, every single supply chain can be big links like big container ships, and it could be little links like the guy working at the gas station, the guy or gal working at the gas station. If they, aren't at work that day and the gas station has to close, maybe that creates a bend in the link. It can be really big and really tiny, and you can break a chain from anywhere.
So let's hope that supply chain and Christmas will happen as scheduled.
Yeah.
With it. But looking into 2022, talk to us a little bit about what your theories or your predictions would be on how small and medium-sized businesses, what they're going to face in 2022 with supply chain issues. Do we have sort of, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Is there some good news that we can talk about, or is this going to follow us well into 2022 with all that's going on? Because nothing is immediate, right? There's always that residual and after effect of any concerns or issues that we face. So let's talk about 2022 and sort of your prediction on that.
Well, and I think there's a light at the tunnel even now. I mean, there's all this doom and gloom about supply chain and all the container ships, and it is really hard. But if you go to your local store or you get online, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, we do consume, Americans consume. My husband thinks I make cardboard up when he's at work all day. I'm starting to hide the boxes. So we do consume, and there are things to consume. There are products. For the manufacturers and the merchants who saw this as it started to collapse in 2020 with the pandemic and the surge in consumerism that happened with that, they started to diversify. And that is only going to become more important in 2022. And that's just good business. That doesn't have anything to do with all the breaks in the supply chain, right? Diversification is critical. Target doesn't just sell one type of basket to put your blankets in, and they don't just sell one type of sheet, right? They've got a whole bunch because they learned a long time ago that you have to diversify. So even small businesses can benefit from really looking at what they're doing, where they're sourcing, and what they're selling, and breaking it up and diversifying. Add another product, add something that is similar to yours or complementary to yours that you hadn't been thinking about. Make sure you have funding in place. Make sure that you have that pad to not only add products, but also to last if things get a little bit short at the end of this year, because you've got to ramp up for the beginning of next year. I actually have a client that sells very, very, very high-end home decor and home goods. And she's launching another brand at the beginning of 2022 that is similar in style and design, but a third the price, because she realized she needed to diversify her marketplace so that she can have more consumers that can afford her goods. So she's put a tremendous amount of effort into diversifying and launching an entirely new company, entirely new brand as part of this pivot into making sure that she doesn't have everything in her one basket. And I think that's critical in every aspect of your business, whether it's what products you source, how you source them, where they are manufactured, how you ship them, how you price them. There really isn't anywhere in your business model that you can't look at some sort of diversification.
Well, we've talked, and Brian and I have a couple of podcasts that we've done about talking about making sure you have a plan B, C, and D.
Yes.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, and looking at the opportunity and I always say with something bad that happens, something good comes from it. And perhaps it might be some of the small and medium-sized businesses looking at what products are actually made and manufactured in the US, so they don't have to ship overseas. They don't have to do containers, trucking perhaps, but something that's a little bit more local, that instead of taking weeks to get here, it's days to get here. And well, you talk about diversifying, that could be a plan B or C for some of the people.
Well, and you make a really good point about that. However, the consumers on the other end have to be willing to pay at least 3 to 4 times more for that product than they're paying now. So there's that aspect of it. Also, a lot of components for American-made goods are made overseas. I know Brian and I've talked about this before, Budweiser and Coke get their aluminum from China. Ford gets their parts. We think we're buying American, but it's assembled in America. But there are still components that have to come from somewhere else. We just don't have the raw materials in the United States to make everything from the first moment that we make it until the last piece is produced. And so we still have to have some grace for our global economy. The beauty of where we are with the world is that we do have a global economy. No other country is the big enemy, and no other country is trying to ruin our economy by making less expensive goods. They're just trying to build up their own economy. And so if we can find a way to make all of that work and find a way that we can feel comfortable and safe in the things that we're buying, maybe we want to buy the assembled in America stuff because we want to support those companies. Or, people talk about Amazon being the big bad guy versus the small businesses. Well, I can tell you that I represent at least 50 merchants that all sell on Amazon. And they're all small companies. When you're buying from Amazon, you are actually buying from a small company. Amazon is just the marketplace. It's just a sales tool. It's just a website that these small businesses are listing their products on, and you're buying them from them. So you're still supporting a small business when you're buying on Amazon. I think that's something people don't realize.
My wife actually had a bedding company that she ran through Amazon. Amazon can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. and many times it's the same. But you're 100% right. And you see that through third-party validations that they have on Amazon, that you're actually buying it from another company, another small business. It's funny. I'm going to read a real quick stat, because when you said that, that we might see the supply chain getting better and sooner, the National Retail Federation actually said that the holiday spending is expected to grow between 8.5% and 10.5%, to as much as almost $860 billion. And of course, they went on to say that the nation's largest retailers like Best Buy and Target and Walmart, whatnot, they all have a lot more inventory than they had in the previous year. And I have a feeling they have those, prognosticators who probably said, we need to stock up on this sooner rather than later. Right. And so they could hold the inventory for, a certain extra period of time. Like that didn't, they just build that into the price of the product. At least they have it. Kathleen, you mentioned that you and I have talked before. I've had the pleasure of having you on a podcast that I do. And you have this great expression. It says, when it comes to dealing with supply chain issues, learn to play chess, not checkers. Can you explain to our viewers what you mean by that?
Well, I think the biggest difference between a big company like the ones you were mentioning, Best Buy and Target, the biggest difference between them and small businesses is psychology. The big companies have a plan. They have a plan for if something goes wrong or if a warehouse catches fire, they have a plan and they're able to quickly switch from plan A to plan B to plan C. They think about what might happen 5 steps down the road. And
Right.
Then when it happens, they pull out a plan. They pull out their, okay, we're at this step, grab that book. Small businesses don't do that. They don't have that psychology. They fall in love with their product. They fall in love with their website. They fall in love with how they're doing it, and they get stuck. And so that plan A, B, and C that you mentioned, Kelly, that can just be plan A, B, and C, but it can also be thinking about chess. If this move happens, this is my move, and I have a plan for it. And maybe it's not my favorite plan, I'm not in love with it, but I have a plan. If the other guy takes this move, my move is this. I think it's critical to be looking 4 or 5 steps ahead and be thinking through all of the what ifs. What if my manufacturer can't get my stuff out on time? What if my ship gets stuck outside of Port of Long Beach? What if I can't get something onto a truck? What if the Postal Service prices get real high with the surcharges for holidays? How am I going to handle that? You have to look at all of your what ifs, and it's hard. It's depressing. It's like, it's writing a prenup. right? Before you get married, and you have to think about the what ifs. We don't plan on getting divorced, right? We don't plan on someone passing away. We're going to write a prenup and we're going to think about the what ifs. That's all it is in business. You're just thinking about the what ifs. You're having the hard conversations. You're looking at the what ifs for funding. What if this happens? Where am I at for funding? Right? And so you have to know. And then when something happens, you think, oh, I already have a plan for that. I already have a book. I'm going to get that.
Yeah.
And so there's a measure of confidence that actually puts you in the psychological frame of the larger companies, but at a smaller scale. And the beauty of that is these small businesses can pivot so much faster to their plan A, B, or C. The big company is like moving a cruise ship. It takes a long time to change directions. Even if they had the book and the plan, they have to have 50,000 committee meetings in order to enact the plan.
Yeah.
A small business that has plan A, B, and C, and they're like, all right, we're going to C, they can go to C today. They
Right.
can make the switch immediately and they can pivot. And in that respect, I think in the United States, small businesses are in a better position because of that, because they have the ability to pivot at any time. They don't have to ask people. They don't have to have a committee. They don't have to look through 1,000 pages of legal terminology in order to make a change. They can just say, you know what, we're changing now. So they have to let go. They have to not fall in love. And it's about business. It's not personal.
Well, and that's interesting because we've talked in previous podcasts as well, and about having a plan put in place, a disaster plan. You know, Brian and I just played the what if game. You know, what if your building burned down, you know, and your inventory wasn't it? What are you going to do? How are you going to recover? Things like that. So it's a matter of, in a selfish plug, that the NJSBDC can help businesses put these contingency plans in place, and in looking at all of those different options, and talk to an expert consultant to be able to help with those plans and putting them in place. You hope to God that you never have to actually act on some of these contingency plans, but it's always great to have something put in place just in case. That just in case time frame is really important, because businesses don't know what they don't know until it happens, right?
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's important to find your resources on that. Like you said, you guys can help with this, and we have this plan, or you have even Reddit and Facebook and groups to ask other business owners, or groups like Brian's small business podcast. Listen to those, read them, understand what your options are, so that you have resources. You think, this happened to me, oh wait a minute, I know someone that can help with that, I'm going to give them a call. That's part of that quick pivot that a small business can do that a big business can't.
And Kathleen, that's a great point, one that we stress all the time. You don't ask, you don't get. And so if you're not asking other business owners what they're doing to deal with inventory issues or labor issues or anything like that, then you're operating in a bubble, right? You're not getting a pulse of what's happening in the outside world, whether it's best practices or things to avoid. So that's a great question. And Kelly, real quick, to your point, a lot of times small business owners, they don't need the whole material sourcing and in the supply chain. They might just be looking for a wholesaler, and that's a lot easy. So it's already assembled, ready to go, to find those locally sourced wholesalers. And even if it's for short term, and Kathleen, I love that advice. Don't fall in love with the product or the process, that it's a business, so that if you need to pivot. And so, instead of making, Ford was making cars one day and they're making, ventilators the next day, and so for your business, if you cannot get access to your products or your goods, okay, what else can you sell? And don't ask that question to yourself, ask it to everybody because
and a lot of the spirits industry did exactly what you talked about. Yeah, Ford did the ventilators, but the spirit industry pivoted to make hand sanitizer.
Exactly.
Right? It's
Exactly.
alcohol, right? So
Those are great examples.
Yeah, they could be very creative with that, and sort of shift those priorities. So, Kathleen, you work with a lot of companies that are importing and exporting, and you're helping those businesses along that pathway. What would be sort of your advice going into 2022 for for businesses, what would their priorities be in 2022? If you could give some nuggets of wisdom for any of those small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, I would say break it down. Think about all of the different components of your chain and all those things I was talking about and where something could break. And then come up with that plan for if we break here, we do this. If we break here, we do this. If we break here, we do this. The number one thing you need to do is funding. You need to make sure that you have the revenue. And if you're making decisions that are detracting from your revenue, you got to check yourself at the door. And you've got to figure out the best way to protect some of that profit margin so that you can keep running. The goal is not to be in business 3 months from now. The goal is to be in business 3 years from now. And so it's really, really important to not be so focused on the little everyday things that you lose track of staying in business 3 years from now. That kind of goes back to that don't fall in love thing. I, had in the last 2 days, just 2 different conversations where I was like, check yourself at the door. One of them was a merchant that I'm working with that had done a prioritization on, okay, here's what we're going to ship first. But they weren't looking at it as clearly as they should have, because what they needed to ship first is their B2B orders to other merchants to get stuff on the shelves, because those other merchants basically pay for the advertising to make your product known and visible and sell it to the end user. And those merchants are prepaying for those products, right?
Wow.
They might be getting it at a discount, but that needs to be prioritized because that's a long-term play, having that relationship with a merchant. And so you have to prioritize that. You have to focus on that. I had another client, and I thought this was just the most incredible, brilliant pivot. They were bringing in a product that was stuck. The supply chain got broken and they were stuck. They started looking at resources. They got on Reddit, they got on Craigslist, they started to dig, and they actually found someone that had brought in thousands of an almost identical product that was stuck with it, that it was stuck in a warehouse in the United States. They negotiated a deal to buy it for less than they would have bought it from overseas.
Wow.
And they got, and that the place that they're buying it is letting them store it and keep it at their warehouse for free, because that was part of the negotiation. So they managed to find a product and source it inside the United States to replace their other product. It's not the identical product, but it's 80%, right? And so they've made this pivot. And as a result of this pivot, their entire profit margin is changing as a result of one thing they found on it was either Reddit or Craigslist, one thing they found on a board and responded. And they were able to save their profitability for literally a couple of years going forward as a result of that one decision. They didn't fall in love with their one product that was stuck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What can I get that's close?
That's fantastic.
For the small businesses, but no, that business, that company that you were talking to did the research. They did the legwork. They were looking at these different marketplaces to have it. I just think that just knowing our client base that we work with, sometimes they're at a loss of where to start. Where do you start trying to find those similar like products? That's a best case scenario, and what a windfall for that company. Probably fair to say that there's not everybody's gonna, find that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Well, isn't the best place to start the NJSBDC?
Well, absolutely. The best place to start is at NJSBDC, because we have consultants and we can talk to them. But I guess there is some legwork that goes along with the business that needs to do that research as well.
There is, and you've got to make sure that you're keeping your mind and your heart open to those resources and to those ideas. Getting locked into something is the biggest pitfall in any business decision, right? Getting locked into one direction. I know when I'm trying to kind of figure out what other people are doing and try and find the best way to do something new, and certainly with supply chain, we've had to do that all year. The first place I go is to groups. Like I'm in Facebook groups for business owners that work in e-commerce and operations. And one of the first things I do is go to that group and say, hey, what's everybody doing for getting collecting your UK VAT and getting it remitted to the Queen? What's everyone doing for that? Right. And then 20 people come out and tell you what they're doing, you all of a sudden have resources. You all of a sudden have experts and people who've already been doing it who can tell you and help you. You can do the same thing on LinkedIn. You can do it in Reddit. You can do it locally. You can do it with local business groups. You can get online to Meetup and join Meetup groups. You know, one of the biggest groups in the country that brings people together to support each other through their journey is AA, for example. And it's little groups of all people who've been there, help the people who are going through it. It's not the same as what we're talking about with business, but it's the concept of find groups, find other people who have shared experiences and start asking questions, telling them you have a problem and start asking questions. It's the only way to turn this from an individual problem to a global solution.
What's the saying? First step to recovery is to acknowledge you have a problem.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and for our audience, in case, just look at your store shelves, right? Yeah. And see where you stand. This has been great. Kathleen, as expected, you over-delivered on the content and the suggestions and the advice and the mapping. It really is fantastic. And we can't thank you enough for being our guest today on the Not So Small Business Webcast. Thank you very much for that. And Kelly, as always, I love being your co-host. I learn something new every day that I can share with my clients.
Never a dull moment, Brian. Never a dull moment.
Never dull. And of course, to our viewers today, you know, we appreciate all of the feedback you send us, the questions from our podcast, from our webcast, the you know, ideas for future topics. Keep them coming. You know, our contact information is on the website, NJSBDC.com. And we look forward to the next month and the next episode of the Not So Small Business Webcast. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, Brian. This is great.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it.
Sure. And everybody watching, have a great day.